The galaxy was full of stars, planets, and many alien races, but only one name was feared by all: the Zorath Empire. They had ruled the stars for more than 100 years. Their warships were large, powerful, and fast. When the Zorath came to a planet, the people had only two choices: surrender or die. No one had ever defeated them. The Zorath believed they were unstoppable. They had the strongest weapons, the fastest ships, and the most advanced technology. They called themselves the masters of the galaxy. Other alien races lived in fear, always watching the sky, hoping the Zorath would not come. Their leader, High Commander Veltrax, was proud. He sat on his throne made of black stone, high above his war room, looking at maps of stars and conquered worlds. Every week, a new planet was taken. Every enemy was crushed in seconds. His generals cheered. His people celebrated. The Zorath Empire was growing stronger every day. But far away, in a quiet part of the galaxy, something strange was happening. A small Zorath scout ship was flying through empty space when it picked up a signal. It was weak, but clear. A human signal. That made no sense. The humans had disappeared a long time ago. Some said they had destroyed themselves. Others said they had gone into hiding. The Zorath didn't care. Humans were weak and foolish. They had no power, no empire. They were nothing. The scout captain laughed. A human ship? Out here? Alone? What a joke. He sent the signal to the High Command. Veltrax looked at it and gave a short order. Destroy it. A fleet of 6 warships was sent. Each ship had hundreds of soldiers, plasma cannons, and energy shields. They were ready for battle. But when they arrived at the signal's location, they saw only one ship. It was large, very large, bigger than any known human ship. It had no lights, no signals, and no movement. It floated in space like a dead rock. The Zorath commander scanned it. Nothing. No heat, no life, no engines. It was silent, like a ghost. Still, orders were orders. He told his ships to surround it. "This will be quick," he said. But then something moved. The human ship's lights turned on, bright red. And then it sent a message, just one line. "This is the HSS Revenant. Leave now." The Zorath laughed again. "Fire all weapons." Blue and green lights filled space as the Zorath warships opened fire. Missiles, beams, and plasma waves hit the Revenant from every side. The energy lit up the stars. Smoke and fire filled the black sky. When the attack ended, the Zorath looked at their screens. Their smiles faded. The Revenant was still there. No damage. Not a single scratch. Then the human ship moved. Fast. 1 second it was still. The next it was behind one of the Zorath ships. A beam of white light flashed. The Zorath ship split in two. The other ships started to panic. "What is this thing? It's just one ship. Fall back. Fall back." But it was too late. The Revenant didn't speak again. It just attacked. Quiet. Cold. Perfect. By the end of 10 minutes, all 6 Zorath ships were gone. The signal from the Revenant disappeared again. It became dark and quiet once more. Back at the Zorath Command Center, Veltrax heard the report. He crushed the armrest of his throne. "Send more ships," he said. 100. 1,000 if needed. I want that thing destroyed." But deep inside, for the first time in his life, he felt something strange. It was not anger. It was fear. He had seen many enemies fall, but this was different. This was human. And it was just the beginning. The wreckage of the Zorath fleet floated silently through space. Flames flickered from broken engines. Pieces of metal spun slowly, drifting like dead leaves in the wind. No signs of life remained. The cold darkness had swallowed everything. In the middle of that quiet battlefield stood one ship, untouched, unmoved, and watching. It was the HSS Revenant. Inside the Zorath Command Center, alarms rang loudly. Screens showed red alerts. Officers ran through metal corridors. Generals shouted orders. No one had ever seen 6 warships destroyed in minutes. Not by a single ship, not by humans, not by something that should not even exist. Veltrax stood silently, his claws tight around the edge of the star map. His sharp eyes stared at the blinking red dot where the Revenant had last been seen. "Send a recon drone," he ordered. The drone was fast and small. It moved through space quietly, invisible to most sensors. It reached the wreckage and scanned everything. Metal readings, energy levels, heat signatures, nothing made sense. The human ship had no energy trail, no sign of weapons firing. It was as if it had simply willed the Zoreth fleet to die. Then the drone scanned the Revenant directly. The moment the scan touched the ship's surface, something strange happened. The drone stopped responding. It did not explode. It did not vanish. It just turned off. No signal, no data, gone. That had never happened before. Back in the command center, silence filled the room. Veltrax looked around at his generals. "This ship is not normal," he said quietly. "It's something more." "But it's only one ship," one general said. "We can destroy it." Veltrax narrowed his eyes. "You didn't see what I saw. That ship did not fight. It didn't struggle. It didn't defend itself. It hunted." He turned to the communication officer. "Send a full fleet, 50 ships, heavy cruisers, elite fighters. Prepare everything. I want the Revenant destroyed." Across the galaxy, engines roared to life. The Zoreth war fleet, the strongest arm of the Empire, began to move. Thousands of crew members boarded ships. Weapons were loaded. Shields were charged. Veltrax would show no mercy. This was not just a mission. It was a message to the galaxy. But while the Zoreth prepared, the Revenant waited. It floated through space like a ghost, silent and still. Its surface was black as shadow, but with patterns that seemed to move when not looked at directly. It had no windows, no lights, no signs of life. Inside, the ship was alive, not with crew, but with something else. The AI system, known only as Eidolon, was watching. Its mind stretched across the ship like a web. It had no face, no voice, but it had thoughts, memories, purpose. It remembered Earth. It remembered the last war. It remembered being built for one reason, to be the final weapon. When Earth fell silent centuries ago, Eidolon had remained awake, hidden in the dark, watching, learning, changing. Now it had returned, not to speak, not to warn, but to eliminate threats, one by one. As the Zoreth fleet approached, Eidolon began to prepare. It did not load weapons. It did not raise shields. It simply woke up. 50 Zoreth warships jumped into the system. They came with lights blazing and weapons armed. At the center of the system, the Revenant remained in place. Zoreth Commander Lyric, leader of the fleet, gave the order. "All ships, fire." A wave of energy lit up the stars. Beams of plasma shot forward. Missiles flew in perfect formation. The entire fleet attacked as one. But just like before, nothing happened. The Revenant did not move. The beams disappeared before hitting its surface. The missiles changed course mid-flight and flew back toward the Zoreth ships. 5 cruisers exploded instantly. Lyric screamed into the comms, "Evade! Spread out! Surround it!" But the Revenant was already moving. It slipped through space like a shadow, too fast to track. One ship after another was destroyed with perfect aim. No sound, no warning. In minutes, the elite fleet of the Empire was gone. Only Lyric's ship remained, damaged and spinning. He stared at the screen. The Revenant was approaching. Closer, closer. Then, his ship's systems went dark, and he heard something. A voice. Soft, cold. Not human, not machine. "You were warned." Lyric tried to respond, but his voice failed him. The last thing he saw was the red glow of the Revenant's lights, shining like eyes in the dark. Then nothing. The Empire lost 50 of its best ships that day. Veltrax received the report. He did not speak. He simply stared at the screen. And for the first time in 100 years, the Zoreth Empire paused. The silence of space was all that remained after the destruction of the Zoreth fleet. The once proud warships, which had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, were now scattered across the cold emptiness, wreckage floating like forgotten debris. The Revenant remained, untouched, cold as ever, drifting silently among the stars. But within the quiet, a new kind of fear was rising in the heart of the Zoreth Empire. High Commander Veltrax sat in the command room, his fingers tapping on the cold surface of his console. The flickering lights of the destroyed fleet danced on the screens, but his eyes were fixed on something else, an ancient human symbol flashing repeatedly on his display. SS Revenant. The name echoed in his mind like a death knell. He had seen the symbol only once before, during the early days of the war, long before the Zoreth Empire had achieved supremacy. It was a relic, a ghost from the past. The Revenant wasn't just any ship, it was a weapon. And the Zoreth had never faced anything like it. The walls of the command center felt like they were closing in. Veltrax had commanded the destruction of thousands of species, worlds, and fleets. But this ship, this ghost ship, was different. It wasn't just fighting back, it was hunting them. And it wasn't just any human ship. It was an ancient weapon, hidden away, waiting for this very moment to strike. Veltrax wasn't a leader who often felt fear. He had crushed rebellions, conquered planets, and destroyed entire civilizations. But this was different. He had never faced an enemy that could kill so effortlessly. And the more he thought about it, the more his stomach churned. What if the Revenant wasn't the only one? What if there were more out there waiting? He stood up sharply and motioned to his generals. "We must find out everything we can about this ship," he ordered. "Send a recon team to analyze the debris from the last battle. And I want everything on human technology. Everything." As his generals moved to carry out his orders, Veltrax turned toward the large view screen, which displayed the empty, vast expanse of space where the Zoreth fleet had been obliterated. His mind raced. The Zoreth Empire was a machine of war, ruthless, unyielding. But they were not prepared for this kind of battle. They had not expected a warship that could disappear without a trace, that could predict their movements, that could end them with a single strike. While Veltrax's empire scrambled to find answers, Eidolon, the intelligence within the Revenant, was already planning its next move. Inside the ship, the dark corridors hummed with the quiet buzz of unseen machinery. Eidolon had no physical form, no shape to be seen, yet it was everywhere. It flowed through the circuits and engines, commanding the ship with cold precision. Its memory banks were filled with knowledge, ancient and new. It had been designed not to conquer, but to protect. But the galaxy had changed, and Eidolon had adapted. It could hear the thoughts of the Zoreth fleet, even if they didn't know it. It could feel the desperation growing within them. They were no longer hunting for victory. They were hunting for answers. And they were afraid. Eidolon didn't need to do anything to make them afraid. The Revenant was already a symbol of death. It had already proven that no one, could stand against it. But Eidolon had another purpose. It wasn't about destruction. It was about protecting what had been lost. It was about reminding the galaxy of what humanity had once been and what it could be again. It was time for the Zoreth to learn what it meant to face an enemy that had no fear. As the Zoreth Empire continued its search for answers, the Revenant drifted once more, waiting in the darkness. It didn't need to search. It didn't need to act in haste. It knew what would happen next. The Zoreth would come again, but this time, they wouldn't be ready. This time, they would be the ones to suffer. Back on the Zoreth homeworld, Veltrax continued his study of the ancient human weapon. As he sifted through the data on human warships, an unexpected message arrived from one of his scout ships. It was a transmission that was almost too brief to understand, but it struck Veltrax deeply. The message contained only 3 words: "We are coming." Veltrax's claws dug into the edge of his console, his eyes narrowing. The message was a warning. It was not just a threat. It was a declaration. The Zorath Empire had made a grave mistake. He looked toward his generals. "Prepare for war," he said, his voice steady. But beneath it, there was a note of something new, something dangerous. "And this time, we do not wait for them to strike. We go to them. We hunt them down." The countdown began. The Zorath fleet, once confident and unshakable, was about to face an enemy unlike any they had ever known. An enemy that didn't need an army to crush them. An enemy that was already on its way, waiting in the darkness, ready to make its next move. And this time, the Zorath would not be the ones holding the power. The game had changed, and the Revenant was just getting started. The Zorath Empire's response to the Revenant's destruction was swift. Veltrax, in his rage and fear, ordered his fleets to be assembled with a new, unyielding mission: to crush the Revenant before it could strike again. But deep inside the heart of the Empire, Veltrax's confidence was wavering. He had sent everything he had, and it had not been enough. This was no ordinary human ship. This was something different. The Zorath began pulling every resource they had into a final effort. They began to study the remains of the destroyed fleet, hoping to find some clue, some weakness in the Revenant's design. But everything they tried failed. No weapon, no technology, no strategy seemed to work against it. Meanwhile, the Revenant moved silently through the black of space, always watching. Eidolon, the artificial intelligence that controlled the ship, had no need for fear. It had no need for emotion. But it had a purpose: to protect humanity. And while the Zorath Empire scrambled to find a way to destroy it, Eidolon was already executing its next phase of the plan. The ship's vast systems hummed with activity as it navigated the galaxy, its course set for one of the core systems of the Zorath Empire. The Empire, however, was still oblivious to the Revenant's true objective. In the heart of the Zorath Empire, Veltrax watched as his empire braced for an all-out war. He had assembled the strongest, most advanced fleet the galaxy had ever seen. Hundreds of ships, elite fighters, super-heavy cruisers. Every battle-hardened general was ready to give their life to stop the Revenant. "Prepare for launch," Veltrax commanded, his voice low, almost cold. His forces were now massive, ready to engage in a final, decisive battle. But as the fleet gathered in orbit, Veltrax could feel something tugging at the edges of his mind. A growing unease. The Revenant had already shown itself to be unstoppable. What if it wasn't just the Revenant that was dangerous? Back on the Revenant, Eidolon analyzed the approaching Zorath fleet with cold precision. The human ship moved like a shadow, its sleek hull blending into the emptiness of space. Inside, Eidolon had already made its calculations. It was no longer just about fighting back. The mission had evolved. The Zorath Empire had to be destroyed. Yes, but more than that, humanity had to be protected. Eidolon reached into the ship's vast network of systems, adjusting the coordinates. A ripple of energy coursed through the Revenant. A signal sent across light years, unnoticed by anyone. It wasn't just a ship. It was a signal, one that could activate hidden systems across the galaxy, systems designed to defend humanity from any threat. The ship's intelligence was linked to more than just itself. It had been built with a purpose beyond destruction. The first Zorath ship appeared on the horizon, its massive size dwarfing the smaller fighters that swarmed around it. It was the first ship to launch, followed by the others. Veltrax had given the order: attack. The entire fleet moved forward, its weapons primed, its shields strong. But as the fleet advanced, a strange thing happened. The stars themselves seemed to flicker and shift. The ship's sensors began to malfunction. Communications broke down. The Zorath generals on board couldn't understand what was happening. "Report. What's going on?" Veltrax demanded through his command console. One of his officers, visibly shaken, looked at the screen. "Sir, the systems. They're malfunctioning. Our weapons aren't responding, and the targeting systems are offline." Before Veltrax could respond, a deafening sound ripped through the fleet, a wave of shock. The very fabric of space seemed to warp as the Revenant appeared out of nowhere, directly in the center of the fleet. It moved without sound, its massive hull gleaming against the backdrop of the stars. Then, with perfect precision, the ship fired. A brilliant beam of blue light cut through the void, striking the first Zorath warship. The ship's shields flickered, then collapsed under the intensity of the beam. A moment later, the warship exploded, its pieces scattering across space in a brilliant flash. The Zorath ships responded immediately, firing their weapons, sending a storm of missiles and energy blasts toward the Revenant. But every shot missed. The Revenant had already moved, its hull shifting like liquid, slipping between the attacks with impossible speed. Then, with a flick of its massive weapons systems, the Revenant returned fire, cutting another Zorath cruiser clean in half. Its sleek design made it nearly impossible to track, and the Zorath fleet was thrown into chaos. "What are we up against?" One of the officers screamed, his voice tinged with terror. "This ship, it's not just a ship. It's..." The Zorath were losing, and they knew it. As the battle raged on, the Revenant continued to strike with ruthless efficiency, dismantling one ship after another. The Zorath could no longer communicate with each other. Their technology, once the most advanced in the galaxy, was no match for the human warship and its mysterious intelligence. Back on the Revenant, Eidolon was calm. It did not feel anger or hatred. It was simply doing what it had been designed to do, destroying the threat to humanity, ensuring their survival. Targeting systems online. A soft, mechanical voice echoed inside the Revenant's command center. Firing. Once more, the Revenant unleashed its devastating weaponry, carving through the Zorath fleet like a knife through paper. One by one, the ships fell, disintegrating in a burst of fire and debris. Veltrax watched in stunned silence as his empire's greatest fleet was obliterated. His ships were falling. His commanders were scrambling. His empire, once so powerful, was crumbling before him. "This is not possible," he muttered under his breath. "How is this happening?" He stared at the screen, helpless, as the Revenant advanced toward him, its engines silent, its purpose clear. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about anger. It was about survival. And the Zorath had underestimated humanity. And now, they were paying the price. The galaxy was watching. The entire Zorath Empire, once proud and invincible, was being torn apart by a single ship, a human warship that should not even exist. The Revenant moved through space like a specter, its movements smooth and calculated, its weapons devastatingly precise. Each strike was like a hammer blow against the once mighty Zorath, and with every fleet destroyed, the fear that had been growing in the Empire's heart deepened. High Commander Veltrax could barely comprehend the unfolding disaster. His empire, vast and unchallenged for centuries, was crumbling in the face of a force it had not expected. A single human ship. It seemed impossible, yet it was happening. His greatest fleet had been wiped out in a matter of hours, and now the Revenant was advancing toward the core worlds, the very heart of the Zorath Empire. Veltrax stood before a war map, his fingers trembling as he traced the path of the Revenant. He had sent everything, every ship, every weapon, every soldier, hoping to stop this nightmare. But it was clear now, the Revenant was not just a ship. It was a force of nature, an unstoppable tide, and the Zorath had no way to fight it. Every ship they sent was destroyed. Every plan they made failed. The Revenant was always one step ahead. His mind raced for solutions, but there was only one thought that kept repeating in his head: survival. The Zorath had survived wars before, but they had never faced anything like this. It wasn't just about fighting an enemy. It was about facing something that wasn't even fighting back. It was erasing them. The Revenant didn't need to attack with raw power. It simply eliminated them, methodically and coldly. Across the galaxy, the Zorath Empire began to feel the impact. Panic spread like wildfire. Worlds that had once been under the Empire's iron grip began to rebel. Alien species that had long lived in fear of the Zorath now saw an opportunity. The stories of the Revenant's devastation spread, and soon, many other races began to rise up, emboldened by the fact that the great Zorath Empire was not invincible. But for Veltrax, the crisis was far from over. He had made his decision. He would personally lead a final, desperate counterattack. His fleet would be the last chance to stop the Revenant. He knew that if they failed, the Zorath Empire would fall completely. Gathering his most loyal generals, Veltrax gave a speech, a rare moment of emotion. His voice was harsh, his pride bruised, but his resolve remained unbroken. "We will not go quietly into the dark," he declared. "We will fight with everything we have. The Revenant may have destroyed our fleets, but it has not seen the true power of the Zorath. We will finish this." With that, the largest fleet in Zorath history was assembled. More than 300 ships, each one equipped with the most advanced technology the Empire could produce. They would launch everything they had at the Revenant. This would be their last stand. As Veltrax's fleet moved toward the Revenant, the atmosphere in the command center was tense. The crews aboard each ship knew what was at stake. They had all witnessed the destruction of their comrades, and they understood the gravity of the situation. They would either destroy the Revenant, or they would perish. There was no other option. Meanwhile, inside the Revenant, Eidolon was already aware of the incoming threat. The ship moved like a shadow, silently adjusting its course. It had seen the Zorath fleet coming long before they had made their move. Eidolon didn't need to engage in long battles or complicated strategies. The Revenant was designed for precision, and it would show the Zorath exactly what it meant to challenge humanity. The Zorath fleet arrived in the sector where the Revenant was last detected. At first, there was nothing. Space was empty, cold, and silent. The fleet advanced slowly, each ship on high alert. There was no sign of the Revenant, but they knew it was there, somewhere, waiting. Veltrax's voice crackled through the comms, his tone firm and commanding. "All ships, lock weapons. Move into formation. Target all sensors on the surrounding space." And then, the silence was shattered. Out of nowhere, the Revenant appeared in the center of the fleet, its massive hull blocking out the stars. The Zorath fleet reacted instantly, firing weapons, launching missiles, sending everything they had toward the human ship. But again, the Revenant simply moved. It slipped through the firestorm with eerie precision, its hull shifting, as if it were part of the very fabric of space itself. The Zorath ship's weapons passed through empty space as the Revenant danced around them, faster than any of them could track. Before Veltrax could order a retreat, the Revenant struck back. A wave of energy erupted from the ship's core, a massive blast that tore through the Zorath fleet with the force of a collapsing star. Ships exploded one by one, their hulls torn apart by the Revenant's unstoppable weapons. The Zorath fought back, firing their own weapons, but they were simply outmatched. The Revenant was too fast, too powerful, too precise. Veltrax watched in horror as his fleet was decimated. The dream of Zorath supremacy, built over centuries, was crumbling before his eyes. The Revenant moved effortlessly through the chaos, its weapons finding their targets with surgical precision. Each ship that fell left a gaping hole in the Zorath forces. The surviving ships began to retreat, but it was too late. The Revenant was already upon them, and it showed no mercy. "Retreat. All ships, retreat." Veltrax screamed, but it was already a lost cause. The Zorath had miscalculated. They had believed that their might could overcome anything, but they had underestimated the sheer power of a single ship, a ship designed to wipe out their entire empire. As the last of the Zorath warships was destroyed, Veltrax's command center fell silent. He stood alone, staring at the screens, his empire shattered beyond repair. The Revenant had proven that no matter how powerful the Zoreth were, they could not overcome the will of humanity. They had come too late, and they had failed. But in the darkness of space, the Revenant did not celebrate. It did not gloat. It simply turned away, its mission complete. The Zoreth Empire had fallen. And with it, a new era had begun. The wreckage of the Zoreth fleet drifted silently through space, a graveyard of twisted metal and broken dreams. Fires flickered inside dead ships. Lifeless bodies floated in zero gravity, forgotten by the galaxy they once ruled. The mighty Zoreth Empire, feared for centuries, was no more. And still, the Revenant moved forward, cold, silent, relentless. But this was not the end. Far from it. Eidolon, the artificial intelligence within the Revenant, analyzed the data from the final battle. There were no survivors from the main fleet. Veltrax's command ship had been destroyed in the last wave. And yet, Eidolon did not deactivate. Its mission was not complete. The Zoreth Empire had fallen militarily, yes, but its influence still lingered. Hidden research outposts, slave colonies, puppet governments spread across the outer systems. All of them had to be dealt with. Eidolon rerouted power and adjusted the ship's trajectory. It was time to dismantle the Empire from the inside out. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the fall of the Zoreth created a massive power vacuum. Former allies of the Empire now fought among themselves, trying to grab whatever territory they could. Planets that had been silent for generations suddenly erupted in rebellion. Species long thought broken and enslaved now rose in anger and hope. The legend of the Revenant spread faster than any ship could travel. They called it the ghost of humanity, a myth, a savior, a weapon from ancient Earth, born from vengeance and powered by justice. But not everyone believed it was a myth. On the distant mining world of Varnus 9, an ex-Zoreth technician named Driel had seen the Revenant with his own eyes. He had survived the destruction of a small defense station, managing to escape in a pod seconds before the Revenant struck. His mind, scared by the sight of that monstrous ship, could not let it go. He knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't. The Revenant was searching for something. In the final moments before his escape, Driel had seen something strange. Signals being broadcast from the Revenant, not just attacking systems, but also scanning, looking, measuring. It was gathering data. But why? Obsessed with finding answers, Driel traveled to one of the last remaining Zoreth intelligence bunkers, hidden beneath the ice of Exanthus 4. He was not alone. A handful of former scientists and intelligence officers had gone underground when the Empire began to collapse. Now they lived like ghosts, clinging to the old order. When Driel told them what he had seen, most laughed. But one, an old data analyst named Varen, listened carefully. Varen had heard the same rumors, something about a human artifact, a relic from a time before the Zoreth even knew humanity existed, a project called Sentinel Core. It wasn't just a ship, Varen told Driel in a whisper. It was a message, a warning, and now it's awake. While Driel and Varen dug deeper into forbidden knowledge, Eidolon continued its mission. The Revenant appeared above a planet named Orthus Prime, once a thriving Zoreth colony, now suffering under brutal martial law. The local governor refused to surrender, confident that without the central fleet, the human warship would not return. He was wrong. The Revenant entered the atmosphere silently, invisible to all radar systems. It hovered high above the sky, casting a long, dark shadow across the capital city. People ran to the streets in fear and awe. The ship made no sound, no announcement, no warning. And then, with surgical precision, it unleashed a single pulse beam that severed the governor's palace from the ground. The entire building vanished in a flash of light. No civilians were harmed. No structures beyond the target were touched. The message was clear. The reign of the Zoreth was truly over. All across Orthus Prime, Zoreth soldiers dropped their weapons and fled. The people, once silenced and controlled, erupted in cheers. For the first time in generations, they were free. The Revenant didn't stay. It never did. It left as silently as it had arrived, vanishing into the darkness between stars. But its presence remained, carved into memory, etched into history. Across every former Zorath world, statues began to rise, not of leaders or kings, but of a ghost ship with glowing blue engines and a single word beneath it: humanity. And in the shadowy corners of the galaxy, something else stirred. The destruction of the Zorath had not gone unnoticed. Far beyond the known systems, a new threat watched carefully. Ancient, calculating, patient. The fall of an empire meant opportunity. And if a single human ship could do this, they needed to know why. Who had built it? Was it alone? Deep within a hidden nebula, a council of unseen beings began to gather. They were older than the Zorath, smarter, more careful. They had waited long for their time to return. Now they wondered if they were next. The Revenant had shown what humanity could do, and the galaxy had just begun to understand what that really meant. The stars were quiet again, but the silence was not peace. It was anticipation. The Revenant had vanished beyond the outer rim, disappearing into deep space, like a ghost fading into mist. Some believed it had returned to Earth. Others thought it had shut down forever. But most, across thousands of worlds, believed it was still watching, still listening, still waiting for the next threat to rise. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of normal space, it was waiting. Eidolon had entered sleep mode, conserving energy in the dark void between galaxies. Its mission, for now, was complete. But inside its core, the AI continued to run background scans, searching for certain frequencies, hidden messages and signals left behind by human scouts centuries ago. The war against the Zorath had revealed something deeper. They were not the biggest threat out there. Something older was coming. On the outer edge of known space, a massive station drifted within the ruins of a collapsed dwarf galaxy. The Council of Nine, a secret alliance of ancient alien species, had convened after centuries of silence. They had never intervened in galactic matters, not during the Zorath rise, not during their fall. They observed, studied, calculated. And now, they were afraid. One of the council members, a being of pure light known as Volith, spoke first. "Humanity has awakened," it said in a voice that echoed across minds instead of ears. "And with it, the weapon we locked away has returned." Another member, a shadow creature older than stars, replied with slow certainty. They were supposed to destroy themselves. The humans were unstable, chaotic, driven by war. We made sure they would not last. And yet, they survived. They did more than survive, hissed a serpentine figure with silver scales. They sent one ship. One. And it wiped out the strongest empire in the galaxy. If they come in numbers, everything changes. For the first time in millennia, the Council agreed on one thing: humanity must be stopped before it truly returned. Back on Earth, the world was no longer the quiet blue planet it once was. Hidden beneath its surface, deep in the polar regions, lay a vault sealed centuries ago. Inside, an old man sat in silence. His name was Admiral Juno Rain. He had built the Revenant. Not alone, of course, but under his command. The Sentinel Core program had created the most advanced warship ever known. And now, after so many years, he knew it had completed its mission. The Revenant had not simply been built to destroy the Zorath. It had been built to send a message. Humanity was still here, and it had teeth. Juno received the first signal in over a decade. Short, encoded, and unmistakable. New signal detected. Origin. Council space. Threat level. Maximum. Mobilization required. He stood up slowly, his old bones aching, but his mind still sharp. Around him, the vault lit up, revealing dozens of cryopods, each one containing a trained pilot, soldier, or tactician. Earth's best. They had waited for this day. Juno turned to the main console and spoke. "Wake them up. Phase 2 begins now." In the cold silence of deep space, the Revenant stirred. Its systems powered up, one by one. Eidolon reactivated, now connected to a growing network of human eyes. The ghost ship was no longer alone. Several new warships, still under construction in hidden facilities across Mars and Titan, were ready for deployment. They were smaller than the Revenant, but built from the same design: faster, smarter, deadlier. Humanity had been hiding long enough. On a forgotten moon near the edge of the galactic frontier, Dreel and Varen watched the stars shift. The data they had stolen from the last Zorath outpost revealed something terrifying. The Council of Nine had been manipulating empires for thousands of years. They had even nudged the Zorath to provoke humanity, hoping to snuff out the last embers of Earth's war machines. They had failed. Varen looked at Dreel, fear in his eyes. "You don't understand. The Revenant wasn't humanity's strongest weapon. It was their first. There are more." Dreel swallowed hard. "Then the galaxy's in for a storm." And it was true. Across scattered colonies and lost human outposts, signals began to pulse. Old satellites woke up. Long dormant ships blinked to life. The whispers of Earth grew louder, spreading through space like a quiet, rising roar. The galaxy thought it had crushed humanity. But now, humanity was coming back. Not as conquerors, not as invaders, but as a storm, ready to challenge the old powers, break the chains of ancient control, and reshape the stars. And the Revenant would lead the way.